going?
Hey Heidi, how are you?
I'm good. And yourself?
Good. I'm multitasking because I am cooking, and that's like one of my favorite things to do is cook. So I thought, why not share that with you? So here I am doing my thing.
Fun. And you're a teacher. Teachers are very talented at multitasking. Speaking of which, the school year is starting up. I know some of my friends in California have already started. They had their first day just this past Wednesday.
Wow, that's
And
early.
not in California, not in the Bay Area of California. That's pretty typical. And I know you're getting ready to go back into the building soon. So yeah, definitely getting prepared.
Yeah. What I also found interesting is not only when schools start are not necessarily universal. I know when I was younger, a lot younger, it was always like school would always start right after Labor Day, right? Like the Tuesday after Labor Day, September 5th or something. But here it is like the first or second week of August. And so I don't know if that's been a shift or if it's always been like that in California.
It's been
And
like
then,
that for a long time.
okay. And then also like what we discovered too is when we were out in Oregon, like some school districts are on a 4-day work week. And so, yeah, it's interesting to see how certain things are different, but what's going through teachers' minds is probably pretty much the same, right?
Yeah. Well, and so, I wanted to ask you today about the beginning of the school year and give some of our followers some social emotional learning tips, because aside from being a school teacher, you are also a consultant, an education consultant, and you have a strong focus on social emotional learning, as I do as well. And yeah, we get administrators and teachers asking us all the time about, how do we get started with SEL and what do we need to know about to start the school year? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Jen. Like, what do you think educators really want to know right now regarding SEL?
Well, I'll try to stick with like personal statements, my experience, but then also the different channels I'm on, and I see what other teachers are asking as well. So I know right now there's a lot of energy around how are we going to set up our classroom? Because that's the first thing that students see is as soon as they walk down the hallway and turn into that door and into the room, like how are people setting it up now, especially with the restrictions? Are we coming back with masks or not? I saw some people, they're having to do partitions around the different desks, even though the desks are closer. I know last year mandates were like a 6 foot, and now I don't know if it's down to 3. So just the first thing is, how do we create an environment that is compliant with directives from the state or the district and still making it feel very warm and inviting? So what does that mean? And as I'm just saying it out loud, like, is it really about desk placement, or is it more how they feel when you are greeting them and the things that are coming out of your mouth, right? So I think that question, as far as how do you set up an environment, what does it look like, what does it feel like, what's within your control, what's out of your control, and how you start to really build those relationships despite whatever mandates or challenges you have.
Yeah. So, as I'm listening to you talk about that, when I have people ask me like, what should they do to start the school year with SEL? I have to find out more about what they're already doing. Like, where are you at with it? Because it's such an in-depth topic. That's such a broad and open-ended question. Like, I can't just answer it with one answer. I have to know more. And so, if they're really just starting out with social emotional learning, if it's kind of a newer thing and they haven't started basic practices, such as welcoming students as they walk in the door, I mean, that's going to build those relationships that you're talking about. I used to, when I taught, upper elementary, I used to greet my students at the door, and they would have a choice between, a handshake and a high five or a fist bump. And they could even make up their own little thing if they wanted to, right? We had like a little secret handshakes going on. So that kind of stuff really built our relationships. Another one of the 3 basic principles is being able to engage with students in a way that, the lessons are interactive, but also, and interesting to them, right? That they want to learn more, but also engage in a way that they see you as a human being too. Right. So I used to share a lot of who I am outside of school in the classroom. And one of the things that I did always around the second week of school, when they thought they had me figured out already, I would give them a quiz about myself. And I'd put some, weird stuff about me in there, or random stuff that most people don't know. And they'd have to take this quiz. And then I'd have a slideshow that kind of gave all the answers. Like, for instance, I've had over 30 cats in my lifetime, right? And they're like, oh man, I didn't know that.
30 cats.
You didn't know that either. Yeah, if you add them up, I've lost count, but when I was a kid, we had, up to 5 at a time. So, because we had them outdoors, and so we were able to have a lot. So, engagement like that with kids, and then also making sure that they're taking brain breaks throughout the day and you're having fun with it, And then the last of those 3 essential or basic SEL strategies is having a closure to the day that's a really positive closure. Like, what were your highs and lows for the day? If we take the lows, what can you learn from them for tomorrow? Things like that, kind of moving it forward and not ignoring the challenges, but really trying to end it on that motivated piece, right? So those are some of the basics that I would tell an educator if they haven't really done a deep dive yet. If they've done a deep dive, then I would have to know a lot more about where they're at.
Well, I know one thing as we're talking about it now. Oh yeah. Taking your time to pronounce their names the right way, apologizing ahead of time. Sorry if I make any botches, but here's your opportunity to please, I need you to tell me if I'm getting it right, how I need to pronounce it, and what you would like to be called. I mean, I had one student when I went down the names and he said, call me Taco. And the kids kind of snickered, but he's like, no, like that actually, they call him Taco. And I was like, is there a reason? He goes, oh, it's like back when I was in 3rd grade and we had this one project and it just kind of stuck. And so, yeah, for like the whole entire year, he was Taco, and it was just a normal thing. And those little things are not so little.
No.
So there's that. And when you were talking, I'm, teaching this grad class, and some of my students who are teachers, they were talking about the different ways that they go about building relationships and sharing about, like you were saying that you did quizzes about that, and they were doing, oh, I know what it was. The one woman, she does the question of the day. So it could be like, if you were a color, what color do you think you are? Or what color? And then the teacher would always answer it as well. And so every single day, or I don't know if it's question of the day, maybe it was question of the week, but even so, just having these fun questions, and it's not always related to the curriculum. Now, if you could tie it in, that would be excellent, but it really gets that high return on investment where you are building those relationships. Like you said, if they see you as an actual person, then when you start geeking out on the content and stuff, they'll want to maybe take that ride with you a little bit more than as opposed to just being that robot that is delivering to the standards.
Yeah. And I think that it builds trust too. Once they get to know you as a human being, they're like, oh, I can actually trust you. So I was thinking about it when you mentioned the names thing. The names thing is really important to me, and I'm awful at names, but when I'm in a classroom at the beginning of the school year, I get those names figured out real fast because I say them a lot. And I do the same thing as, hey, I'm going to mess this up. Please correct me every time. But then there's these kids and adults too, I find, that have an unusual name or one that's harder for an English language, a first language English person to say. And so they're just like, oh, just call me this other thing anyway, or call me whatever, like however it comes out is fine. I'm used to it. And I'm always like, no, you were given that name. That's important to you. That's who you are. I want to know how to say it. And so I'm going to keep trying to articulate that, with the right pronunciation. And I would like your help to learn it, please. Right? Because to me, that's important. And my name isn't that easy either. Mrs. Marlinghouse. And that was fine for my upper graders. For my kindergartners, I gave them the option of calling me Mrs. M because I liked that too. But a lot of them decided they wanted to call me Mrs. Marlinghouse, and they learned how to say it and spell it. So yeah, I do think a name is, very, what's the word I want to use? It's, it's very intimate. So
That's what I was channeling, but I wanted to see what you'd come up with.
yeah. So learning to say their name is a very intimate thing, and it definitely builds that relationship, versus just, okay, I'm going to make up a nickname for you, or, I'm going to take you up on that. Call me whatever. Like, no, I'm investing in you. I'm investing my time. I'm investing my brain energy to figure your name out. You know what I mean? Because you're important to me. I care about you.
Well, and my last name is Turkish. My husband is from Turkey. He came here when he was, I don't know, 27 or so-ish. And, just taking the time with my husband, and this is, I married this man. And when we were having a kid, it was like, well, what are we going to name our child? And it was a big, big conversation. Should it be something that's easy to spell for the standard English, pronounce, and all the different reasons why we settled on that particular name. And sometimes I'll ask my students, I'll say, oh, wow, I really like that. If you don't mind me asking, like, do you know the story behind your name? And some will say, no, I don't know. And I'll say, well, if you ever go home and have that conversation with your family, I'd love to know, because it's interesting to me, and to show that interest. My husband, when you were talking about, oh, I'm just going to call you this or that, his name, his given name, his Turkish name he goes by his middle name, and it's Zahid, right? Which is not, a very common name around here. I even mispronounced his name for like the first couple of months, and he had to correct me. And so when he was working at this one place, they just randomly decided to call him John, which I thought was so bizarre. I'm like, at the very least, if it's Zahid, like, call him Zeke or Z or something. But John, like, and it really, really bothered him. And after a couple of weeks, he's like, that's not my name. And they looked at him like, what? And I don't know who started calling me John, but it stuck. But that's not my name. And it really bothered him. And he's an adult. So on the flip side, I also discovered that some of my students would rename me, and it was like an affection. Mm-hmm. So like they would call me, hey, OZG. I'm like, okay. And I just went with it because I could tell why they were doing that. It also makes me think about doing an identity poem or collage. And it's like, there's a fine line to wanting to build relationships and getting intimate, like you were using that word, but maybe doing it a little too soon before they start to trust and to really make themselves open and vulnerable. So it's like, what can you do in the beginning to show that there's a respect?
Yeah.
And then maybe from respect goes into trust, which
right.
can then go into vulnerability. So
I was thinking the same thing when it comes to learning their given name, right? And then coming up with a nickname later is fine if that's kind of the relationship that you two have. I mean, I know this one teacher who basically gives all of his students a nickname, and they're endearing, right? Or like this one teacher who called her students cherubs, my little cherubs. And the thing is, if you call all the students by nickname except for one, then that's not inclusive, right? So there is definitely a balance in there, but I think, you probably don't start out with nicknames on the first 2 weeks of school. You really get to know them and build that trust. So And I know we got to get going because I'm taking up your time. You got to finish your cooking project there. Thank you for spending your time with me. But real quick, I wanted to share a story, a personal story about me and my name, because my name Heidi is fairly easy. But one time when I was dating this guy who was really important to me, I dated him for like 4 or 5 years. I went to meet his parents. I went to meet his mom, who lived in a different state. And we stayed there for a couple of days. And the mom, you know, was talking to friends on the phone periodically or whatever. And this one time she's like, yeah, he's here with that girl. And I'm like, that girl? Like, I didn't even have a name, you know, and she didn't mean it like sassy. She was the sweetest little thing, and she was very welcoming and everything, but she just she didn't take the time to remember my name. And that's how she referred to me. And it was very offensive. I mean, that was over 25 years ago and I still remember it. So
Well, and I kind of almost like a similar issue with my name, but in an opposite way. Jennifer is the most common name if you look it up in the 70s. And it's kind of like the Megan or Ashley, like there's lots of Megans and Morgans and Ashleys right now. But for me, it was Jennifer. And I kind of had this complex because, hey, Jen. And I'm like, what? Oh, it's not me. I was never the one. And I was just kind of like that invisible Jen. And for the longest time, I really didn't like my name. And yeah, I mean, names are really, it is your identity. And sometimes it can bring up a lot of issues, right? So that's definitely one thing to keep in mind.
We could definitely do a deep dive on names. All right, Jen. Well, thanks for being here today and talking, you know, beginning of the school year SEL tips. We will bring more to our followers. We'll try to do these a little more frequently and talk you through the beginning of the year.
Yep. And I hope people were fine with me just kind of keeping it real while I'm doing my stuff. I wanted to show that I'm a real person, right? As opposed to my fancy backdrop that we normally see.
Yeah. All right, Jen. See you later.
Bye.